and welcome back to the Mighton Sash window series. In the last episode we were working on the head and the sill, and in this video we're going to be looking at the pulley stiles on the frame. We're going to be focusing on the machining of the housings for the pulley wheels and the pockets that give you access to the sash box once the window has been fitted. First part to machine is the pocket, and here's a little info on what the pocket is on the sash window that I have removed in my lockup. So the pocket, for reference, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is a little component in here, and you see this little screw in this pulley style. I'm not going to remove the pocket, but effectively you remove the parting bead. If it will come out, there we go. I do mine in halves. Then there is a groove in this pulley style. So if you then take this staff bead off, you can undo this screw, and the section of pulley style from here, half width, so it's split on the back of this groove here, is actually removable all the way up to about the middle of the window. So that section comes out, and then that gives you access to the weights that are in the actual box there. So the weights sit in here. These are the steel weights hanging on the cord. Can lift one out. My camera will get focus. And you can actually access them through this pocket here. So it's a maintenance thing. Once the window has been fitted, you can remove that pocket and access the weights. So in 150 years time, when the sash cord snaps after it's been painted 100 times and it's gone stiff and then cracked and fell off, you can take that pocket out, put a new sash cord in, and you've got a working window again. So I just mark the extremes of the pocket on the pulley style. The dimensions I take off my drawing, but the pocket needs to be big enough to take the size of weight required to balance the window. If you're using steel weights, which are cheaper, they tend to be a lot bigger, so bear this in mind. Making sure that I'm working on the internal side of that pulley style, there's two angle cuts that meet together at the top side of the pocket, and then two offset angles on the lower side. These angle cuts are so that the pocket is easy to remove. Make sure you don't angle these the wrong way, or the pocket will fall into the sash box or not be able to be removed. The gauge line gives me a centre mark to cut to, then I head to the table saw and put a curve cut into the centre of the parting bead. This is a plunge cut between the setting outlines of the pocket that I've just done, and it's best done with a plunge saw if you have one. If you're going to use a table saw, use extreme caution because it's a pretty dangerous cut and not really something that you should be doing on a table saw. Once the curve cut is done, I clamp each piece to the bench with a 45-degree guide block and plunge cut to the setting outlines that I drew earlier. I'm only taking each cut to that centre line that I've gauged, and the cut extends from the parting bead, that curve cut we've made on the table saw, to the inside of the sash. You're not cutting this pulley style all the way through, it's just on that inner sash section. Cut down to that centre line for all the cuts, and the pocket should be free at the top but just held together with that grain that connects the two cuts on the bottom side of the pocket. All we need to do then is raise the board off the bench and support the underside of the material near that cut, and then just give it a quick sharp tap with a hammer, and that should break the grain between the two cuts if you're lucky and release the pocket. This is what a finished pocket looks like. I've not drilled the screw hole yet, but effectively you've got a lip there that this pocket seats onto, and a little housing in the top that allows it to locate and not fall out either side. Now we've made that part removable, we need to make it fixed again. So just jumping onto the pillar drill, I'm setting up my little trend carbide countersink cutter, just setting a depth there to house a little screw that will hold it back together. And the screw needs to sit visually in the middle of the pocket. So the part we're going to see is from the edge of the groove here, and it's going to be the same distance as the outside pulley style clearance room, which is 49mm. So I can just gauge that line partly up there, and then mark in halfway, so that when I lift the sash up, it looks in the centre. Okay, so there might be a little bit of breakout on that back edge, so just remove that. And then when put back together, it should sit pretty nice and flush. You can work out what bit's preventing it from going back flush if necessary. What you could do is drill right through the piece with a pilot hole. So I'm using a 4mm screw here, so I'd use a 2.5mm pilot hole. So that's a 2.5mm pilot hole and a 4mm clearance hole. So when I screw that together, what you can do is use a screw that definitely sticks through. So if you want the strongest fixing possible in that thickness material, use a screw whereby none of this tapered part of the screw on the end here is in the timber. So all you've got is the solid shanked screw. So from that part there, we can screw that through. We've got a lovely fix in there. And then the bit of the screw that comes off through down the back, we can remove with a angle grinder. So because I'm using a coir, it's got to be a stainless steel screw. So that fits perfectly there. I'm not using brass in this case because generally I tend to leave the pockets in and spray them in place, so the screw will actually be the same colour as the wood to try and blend in as much as possible. Now the pockets are done, we can machine in the pulley wheels, which locate at the top of the window here, and guide the sash cord from the inside here where it attaches to the sash, and it hangs the weight in the box of the sash. You can buy varying depth sash pulleys depending on the size of your box, and you want one so it lands the cord in the centre of the pocket, so I'm using 2-inch pulleys on this window. With absolute perfect timing, the stuff from Mighton has turned up, which is all the hardware for the windows. Let's just get to the point where I wanted to make the jig to cut the pulley stiles in. I've ordered the kit, so I'll put a link in the description. So it's just a kit of components that will do an entire sash window in terms of your ironmongery. It looks like they all come pre-boxed, sort of pre-made kit, so that's quite cool. We've got everything in here. We've got solid brass pulley stiles, the fasteners that I used on the original windows, and we've got the locking vent locks here. I'm just going to take all 4 pulley stiles out. I've got 4 of them out here. The reason I get 4 out is just to check the sizing of the face plates. So it's always good to check it more than one item. So this is about the perfect one, and I'll make my jig to suit this one. So I just set out where I want the housings on the pulley stiles, and then I can begin making the jig. There's the setting out for the pulleys. So the ultimate aim here is to get a jig that I can put straight on the pulley stile, whether it's a left or a right, do no marking out whatsoever, and just router them straight in. Pretty simple to make. If you've seen my latch plate jig, it's using the same construction method as that. So all I need to do is to get some rips of timber, the thickness of the actual pulley, a rip of timber, the thickness of the gap between them, another rip of timber, this width here, and then I'll just create a side plate that pushes against this face here. I've cut all the pieces. These are the 2 that are the same width as the pulley wheel faceplate. I'm going to cut them in half on the crosscut, and then hopefully you can see how this is all going to work. So Mitre Fast really is the tool for this job, and start gluing it together. I keep a melamine board in the shop for doing this on, so that any glue that seeps out underneath, it doesn't stick to it particularly well, and I can clean it off nice and easily. Once I've got to these second housings, I can just square them lines over and make sure that they line up. Then to make it so I don't need to do any markings, I can just mark from the top there and cut the jig off square, and then just sit it flush. And I can set the depth of the router cutter through the jig by holding the ironmongery on the other side. I put a screw through the middle that goes into where the parting bead sits. And I've followed the same manufacturing methods, but I've made a little jig with a plate on the bottom, so that plate is cut to the size of the pulley wheel face plate. I'll just knock the corners off so I can machine them quickly before I do any notching of the corners. And then this hole here is the size of the clearance I need for the pulley wheel to stick through. So this part of the pulley wheel will fit a good clearance through there, but it's nice and accurate, so that it got plenty of meat for the screws to bite into. No clamps needed for this one because it lodges in that opening. Let's get rid of these little flicks. I'll make myself a cup of tea now after that. A word of advice with exterior joinery, if you're spray painting or spray coating, nothing wants to be too tight. That is, I would describe that as absolutely perfect. By the time you've got 3 layers of pretty thick paint on there, you do not want them pulleys to be tapping in tight when there's no paint on, else you're going to have problems in the future. And you tend to be fitting the hardware when your paint's still a little bit green. If you then have to tap it in place with it being tight, then your paint's basically going to glue your ironmongery in. So if you ever have to take it out to service it for any reason, you're going to be pulling the wood fibres with the ironmongery because the paint's going to be acting like a glue. It's now a really quick operation for cutting in. I think there's 40 of these pulleys to cut in, so it's only going to take me about an hour. The results are perfect. There's no marking out on any of the pits now, so I flush it up to the end, push the fence to the side, and everything's done for me. It's kind of a no-brainer to spend half an hour making that jig. So that's it for this video. In the next episode we'll be looking at machining a trickle vent groove in the head, and there's a tiny other little detail in the head to be machined along with that. Don't forget there's the scale drawings and the working model of this window available to buy in my Etsy store, and there's also links below to the Mighton products website, and all the products that I used on this window or in this episode will be linked down below. So I'll catch you in the next one.